Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at one more example. In this one, what we're doing is adding some JavaScript inline. And inline means that this code won't get wrapped up in a file. It will just be added in the content of the page. Again, this is defined by the scope, so because this doesn't have a scope defined, it will be automatically added in the header. Now, most of the time you won't want to use inline JavaScript, and there are several good reasons for this. A couple of them are, one, that because your code isn't in a file, the browser then can't cache that JavaScript file and reuse it for subsequent page loads. So it has to load the JavaScript fresh every time, which means more of a file to download. Also, if Drupal caching is turned on, it means that the cache file is larger in the database, and then that download is going to be larger as well. But occasionally there's a use case for it. For example, you want to create some dynamic JavaScript in your PHP file and load it inline. Just like in our second example here where we used a string as the second parameter to Drupal add.js, inline is another keyword that we can use without specifying an array of settings. But if we wanted to be more explicit about this, we could use this here. I'm going to go ahead and uncomment out this next example and set the type to inline as an array as the second parameter. Okay. When we're using inline JavaScript, I'm going to go ahead and uncomment out this next example. We need to keep in mind the same factors that we have to keep in mind when we're using jQuery inside of a JavaScript file, which is that we don't want to assume that jQuery is the only library that's being used. And so we need to either call jQuery by using the jQuery keyword, or we need to specify a $sign as an alias for the jQuery object. So all we're doing here is using jQuery to grab the text that's inside of a span tag that's in the h1 tag, and this is in our site heading, and then we're just calling an alert on that. So we should see an alert on our page with the name of our site displaying in the alert. So notice that we're using jQuery explicitly here, but if we wanted to use the $sign as an alias, we would follow the same convention that we did in our JavaScript files. And I'm going to go ahead and uncomment out this next example. And that's to wrap it in a function call and pass it a $sign as the single parameter, and then load the jQuery object in that parameter by specifying it in parentheses at the end of that function call. So this is just exactly what we did in our previous examples where we were talking about files. All of the other code is the same. So the one other thing we can do with Drupal add.js is set settings that can then be used by JavaScript files later on. So this is useful if we want to pass some variable that we know what it is in PHP into JavaScript to be able to use later. So I'm going to go ahead and uncomment out these next three lines. What we're doing is globalizing the variable user because we want to save the username inside of a JavaScript variable to be able to use later on. In the next line, what we're doing is setting an array, and we're using the name of our module as the key of the array, and then we're passing it an array of settings. In this case, we're setting just one setting called username, and we're giving it the value of user, the name inside of the user object. And then as the second parameter, we're using setting to specify that what we're doing here is adding a JavaScript setting. We can then access this variable the following way. And in this next line, we're showing how to do it. What we're doing is adding some JavaScript inline in the footer of the site, so we know that our settings have been loaded. And we're accessing this username variable by using Drupal.settings. And then the name of our module, which is what we specified right here, and then the name of our variable here. So if we loaded this file, what would happen is in this part, we save the setting, and in this part, the code in our page gets to grab a variable inside of that setting and use it, in this case, to show an alert that includes the name of the user. Let's go ahead and save this file and then demonstrate it. And what should happen is we'll have a number of files loaded in our page, but then we'll also see a series of alerts. The first one will be the execution of this. The next one will be this one. And then we start using the jQuery object to pull in data, in this case from the main heading. And then we're going to do that again, just a different way. And then finally we should see an alert with the name of the user. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then I'm going to jump back to the browser. We're going to go ahead and reload the page. I'm going to make sure that debugging is turned off. Okay, so here's our first alert and our second alert. And then we're loading the name of the page, but because the page hasn't been loaded yet, this code is in the header, we're not actually seeing any code. And the same thing happens here. Next, our footer code is being loaded, which includes the setting that has the name of our user in it. And indeed, the username is admin for this. Okay.